Three.
Hello, my name is Ivana Boysel. Thank you for joining me on this interview.
My pleasure.
What is your name and the name of your business?
My name is TerryEisele, and I have written a three-part graphic novel called With Only Five Plums, and it tells the life story of a Czech Holocaust survivor who I found and interviewed in the mid-1990s when I was teaching English in the Czech Republic. Recorded about 14 or 15 hours of her life story, and then I used that as my master's thesis at Ohio State. And then about 6 years ago, I hooked up with an artist named Jonathan Riddle, who I think actually has done some work with this group. And he drew it, and I wrote the script for it.
How did you hear about this event?
I was signed up for Space. I've done the last few Spaces, and I'm friends with Ken from the comics community, and that's how I found out.
How long have you been doing this?
I started writing like I said, about 6 years ago for the Czech Holocaust project, and then after I finished that, I started working on a new graphic novel that's based on a 14-year-old Somali girl, refugee living here in Columbus, called Fartoon.
Awesome. Are you an artist, writer, or both?
I'm a writer. I am not an artist.
How did you get started in this field of art?
I knew that I wanted to do something with the story, the woman's story that I recorded while I was teaching in the Czech Republic. And initially I thought about writing a novel, and then after about 2 minutes, realized that I'm not smart enough or driven enough to write a novel. So I then thought about a series of short stories. And that's what I was set to do. And then I attended a Columbus State Community College Writers Conference probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And they had a session on comics and graphic novels. And so I sat in on that session, and about halfway through that session at the Writers Conference, I had an epiphany that this was the form that I should tell Anna's story. And then I just kind of coincidentally ran into my artist. He was working at Blick's Art Supply store, and we started talking about the project, and he had just graduated from CCAD and said that he would be interested in trying his hand at a project like this, and that's how we got started.
Wonderful. So you haven't had formal schooling?
Not in comics, no. My day job, my real job, is as an English teacher at Columbus State Community College. I teach English as a second language.
What is your style as an artist?
So as a writer, there's a common saying that you write what you know, and I would say that in a sense is true. What I really have written is not necessarily what I know, but from what I have learned from others. For example, the interviews that I did in the Czech Republic with Anna Nešporova. That's the subject of the books. And then the current thing I'm working on about the 14-year-old Somali girl, I've had hundreds of Somali students in my classes at Columbus State, and so I've picked up things from them that I've learned from them, and that's what I use as the material for the stories that I write.
Awesome. Do you have a certain audience for your work?
For the Czech books, it's history buffs, so people who are interested in history in World War II. I find that when I'm at comic shows like this one, my audience tends to be a little older. People who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s tend to gravitate towards this kind of semi-true life account of this event that happened during World War II, more than a younger audience. With the new project that I'm working on, Fartoon, it's targeted at more of a young adult audience. So it's about a ninth grader, Somali girl who's in ninth grade, and Takes place over her freshman year, so it's going to start in the fall and be in 3 parts: fall, winter, and spring, in her 9th grade year, and then with flashbacks to her life as a child in a refugee camp and middle school experiences leading up to high school. So that'll be targeted more at a young adult audience.
How do you market your products?
Not very well. I send review copies out to websites that review comic books and graphic novels, and that has worked fairly well. I've gotten 10 to 15 reviews of the checkbooks. I use Facebook. I attend different comic shows, but really the marketing side of it is not what interests me. It's more producing the work, working with artists, and then talking to people at comic shows about the stories.
For producing the work, how do you publish your books?
The 3-volume graphic novel is done through Amazon.com's self-publish print-on-demand wing called Create Space, and they've been fairly easy to work with. I think with the new work with Fartoon, I'm probably just going to work with a local printer here. I may try to send out copies to small press publishers to see if they have any interest in actually publishing it. But my experience doing that with the Czech Holocaust books wasn't very positive, so I think I'll probably just end up self-publishing again.
What advice would you give to someone who has an interest in this field of art?
I would of all different styles and all different subject matter, and if you really want to do it, then carve out some time. A couple days a week, every week, when you sit down and do it. You really have to force yourself to do it. You can always find 17 other things to do in your life other than write or draw. So carve out some time that you devote to it a couple times a week.
What makes this event different from the events you have previously attended?
It's in a bar. But other than that, it's pretty similar. I've done, the largest show that I have done is Mocha, which is in New York City, in Manhattan, and that was fairly overwhelming. But this is pretty typical. It's slightly smaller, but so far it's been a good crowd.
How much importance do you place on networking, and what kind of networking do you use?
I personally don't place a whole lot of importance on it because this is kind of a sideline project for me. It's something that I do for fun in my free time outside of my regular job. If I wanted to make this my career, then I think it would be essential. I use Facebook, and like I said before, I belong to a couple different comics groups. As a writer who doesn't do the artwork, the main kind of networking I do is to try to find artists who would be interested in collaborating with me on projects that I've written. But in terms of networking to try to get my name out there, that's not so important to me.
Thank you very much for letting us interview you.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a nice day.